Hey, I'm back. Black Belt reads. I haven't been able to read as much lately as I normally would, mostly because my son is 3 now and he's just a handful, so I don't have as much time to read as I had the last few years. When he was a baby, he slept all the time, right? So I was able to just read so much. That's all right. There's another reason I don't have as many books on the list, and it's because one of them took me forever to read. But the background is a little messy. I need to reorganize my shelves. I keep meaning to do that. I got a lot of work to do behind me here, but we'll start off with The Crossing. Finally read The Crossing, continued my Cormac McCarthy read through, and this comes after All the Pretty Horses. It is the second in a trilogy. The third book, Cities of the Plains, I'll be reading very shortly. That will only leave me with like 3 or 4 books left from McCarthy to read, and now I've read all of his novels, which is bittersweet. This book, I'll just give a very brief plot summary. No spoilers, really. It's about a boy who goes off to catch a wolf that's been killing livestock, and he goes on an adventure with this wolf, and it's very reminiscent of like Jack London. That's like the first quarter of the book. Then he comes home and something really devastating has happened, and the book kind of goes from there. This was not really my favorite, not in my top McCarthy reads. I gotta say, some of the passages in this book were absolutely beautiful, and I had to read them twice and just sit there and just think like, man, what is he trying to get across here? This is really deep, really intense, and I love those moments. I just didn't love the plot so much in this book. I liked All the Pretty Horses a lot better. Something about it. I do like the main character, Billy Parham. Very similar to our main character from All the Pretty Horses, John Grady Cole. I guess I liked Cole a little better. Maybe he was just a little more well written, or I think the plot was just a little better in All the Pretty Horses. This is actually one of his longest books. I think Suttree was his longest, and then this is second. At least judging off sort of a quick glance at them. So it took me a bit to get through it. Maybe I wasn't in the right mindset to read it. Super glad I read it. Really enjoyed the beginning where he's with the wolf. The ending was incredibly depressing, incredibly sad and devastating, which, this is going to sound weird, but I loved the ending. I really like that. I like when books can make you feel, right? It's just those middle parts were a little disjointed for me, but maybe I'll appreciate it more on a reread. And I'm pretty sure, from what I understand, All the Pretty Horses, then The Crossing, and then Cities of the Plains is both of the characters from the first 2 novels together. So that's going to be really interesting. Maybe they're older, I don't really know. But I gave this 4 stars. Like, I really liked it. It just wasn't an all-time favorite like All the Pretty Horses was. I'm going to shelve it, actually. It goes right here. Blood Meridian's not there. It's because I'm rereading Blood Meridian. I know. So I actually did a whole video about Pinocchio, so I won't go into it, but really enjoyed Pinocchio. Please go watch that video if you haven't already. That was my classic book for the month. Alright, well, the one that took me forever to read, and the reason why this is coming out so late is because it took me forever to finish this book. Not because it was bad. No, it was really good. It's Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. It took me forever to read just because it's a challenging read. Not in the way that, big words I don't understand, or deep philosophical musings that I'm like reading over and over again to just try to get my head around, like McCarthy does. This is more like just kind of the plot is not laid out very easily for you. There's a ton of different point of views. Things are happening fast. You're thrown right into this world and you don't really know what's going on. So after I read probably like 100 pages, I was like, man, I don't even know what's going on. I'm so lost. So I knew that would be the case. I've heard this book's notoriously tough. So I started following the Malazan wiki where it gives kind of a summary. I went chapter by chapter. That helped a lot. So I'd read a chapter and then I'd go read the summary and just make sure I grabbed everything. Several times I was like, God, I didn't even catch that. Once I got about halfway through the book, I stopped doing the chapter by chapter and just did the broad sort of summary of what I had just read. There's like two different summaries. There's a very detailed one and then there's one that's kind of like a loose summary. And I started with the really detailed one, moved on to the loose summary, and by the end of the book, I totally got it. I mean, I feel like I read the book twice because I did that, but it just took a long time. What was it, 600 pages? 650, 666. Yeah, 666 pages. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. This is a 10-book series, and I'm an absolute maniac, and I have bought all 10 books. I bought all 10 books before I even read the first book. Yeah, I do that a lot, where I will just buy the entire series. Definitely gonna read them all. It might take me a while. The next book is Dead House Gates, so super excited to pick up. I hear that a lot of people's favorite book is book 3, so it gives me something to sort of look forward to. And of course, I've heard from several different people that the ending of this whole series is one of the best of all time, which is why I went and bought the whole series. I'm like, if I'm gonna do it, I'm just gonna go big and do it right. So this has high magic, lots of death, lots of gray characters, lots of strange creatures. This is just like a really, really cool fantasy world, and I'm super excited to get more into it. I would do a spoiler review, but man, people have done that. You can go watch someone a lot better than me do a detailed spoiler review. I try to stay away from spoilers just because I know a lot of people probably haven't read this yet. If you're intimidated by it, I would say definitely follow along with the wiki, and that would help a lot. It helped me a lot. I am not a like super great reader, you know. I did struggle with it, but it was a good struggle. It's kind of like reading a classic book where you struggle, but then when it's done, you feel such a sense of accomplishment. So I would highly recommend it. I gave it actually like 3 stars, only because it didn't blow me away, but I know it's considered the weakest. And I think this is a book that would, when I read the whole series, I would think of it differently, I'm sure. Kind of like The Dark Tower. So by Stephen King, The Dark Tower is like my favorite fantasy, if you want to call it a fantasy series of all time. But the first time I read book 1, The Gunslinger, I didn't actually like it that much. I think I gave it like 3 stars as well. And like I read it, and then a couple of years later, maybe when the movie was coming out, I can't remember. I feel like I read the books before the movie came out, but this has been so long. Anyway, all I'm trying to say, I didn't really like the first book as much. Years later, I went and finally read the second book, and it blew me away. The second book is the 3 doors, the drawing of the 3. And there's a moment pretty early on in that book that absolutely blew me away. And I became obsessed. I read all the books within like the same year. And if you ever read The Dark Tower, this will make sense to you. If not, don't worry. After I read the last book, I went back and read The Gunslinger again. And then I read it again. I've read The Gunslinger 3 times. It went from being my least favorite book in the series to pretty much my favorite And that's wild. Anyway, hopefully something like that will sort of click with Gardens of the Moon. Went off on a little bit of a weird tangent there. Definitely read The Gunslinger if you haven't. And if you don't like it as much, keep reading. If you can get to book 2, 3, 4, you're going to fall in love with that series. So I had, I try to do like a fantasy or sci-fi, maybe one or the other, and then maybe like a horror or a thriller. Those are kind of like my 4 books that I'll go to. Thrillers are usually way low on my list. I don't actually have very many thriller books. Mostly it's like horror or fantasy or sci-fi or like a literary book like McCarthy. But I do have some thrillers. Every once in a while, it's nice to read something just simple, easy to read, easy to follow. So after reading Gardens of the Moon, I just needed like something easy to read. So I read a bunch of graphic novels, and then the next physical book I read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So I had no idea what this book was about. I just knew it was pretty short, and I got this copy for really cheap and just wanted to read something strange, and that's exactly what it was. Yeah, it's basically a girl and a boy go on a road trip to meet his parents. But so when I read the title, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I don't know about you, but I thought the book was going to be about suicide. I'm thinking of killing myself. I thought that was what it was going to be about. And that kind of comes back around again, but it's actually not what it's about. I'm thinking of ending this relationship that she has with her boyfriend. So I didn't know that. And that's a little bit of it kind of subverts that, and there are some suicide. There's a suicide in the book. Anyway, I did not know that was what it was going to be about, so it threw me off. But I was really, really into this. The first half of the book I read in one sitting. It was really good, engaging. I couldn't put it down. I almost wanted to read the whole book in one sitting, but I had to stop, of course. And I didn't like the second half nearly as much as the first half. Once they get to the parents' house and kind of the really weird stuff starts happening, it lost me a little bit. By the time the ending came, I definitely saw it coming. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I called it in my mind. I knew, like, this is what's happening, and I was correct. So you probably could figure out what's happening if you read this, but I did enjoy it. It's definitely a thinker. It made me think. It made me confused and try to figure out what's going on. And unfortunately, thrillers always do this for me. I always enjoy the first half, the setup, the figuring out, and then by the time I get to the end, I don't really care anymore. That's why I don't always read thrillers, because I gotta have a good ending. Anyway, I think I gave this like a 3 as well. So I've always heard of how disturbing The Girl Next Door is. So I finally read it. I've had this on my bookshelf for a long time. I think that I was just in a mood to read something depressing. I knew what I was getting into. I actually listened to a podcast about the real life story that this is based on years and years ago, so I pretty much knew exactly what was going to happen. But it didn't take away my enjoyment of the book at all. Jack Ketchum, yeah, he's a really good author. This was written really well, really beautifully written for such a horrible story. And yeah, this just made me hate humanity even more. I mean, this is just the most fucked up story. It's basically about a girl who gets abused by her caretakers. That's pretty much what it's all about, but just goes way deeper than you want it to. There's every sort of kind of awful thing you can think of happens to this girl, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. I don't think I cried, but it made me feel just awful, you know. This was a really quick read. I read this in 2 days. Basically 3 or 4 sittings I read this book. Yeah, I would say be careful if you want to read this, because it's really disturbing, but that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. I can't say that I enjoyed it because it's so messed up. But I'm glad I read it. Yeah, just knowing that it's a real story just makes me so mad. I did an little research, watched a video about the real case, and yeah, just pretty messed up, man. I think the real story is actually worse, even, than the book. Oh, your point of view is a boy who lives next door to this girl. She's the girl next door, and he is sort of complicit in the abuse. And you're kind of meant to feel sorry for him a little bit, or relate to him a little bit. But you also hate him because he's, you know, participating. And then he kind of has like a redemption arc, which I didn't give a fuck about his redemption arc, because I don't feel like anybody could be redeemed for this, the stuff they did. Anyway, I read a bunch of graphic novels as well. I am learning how to edit, so I'm going to try to throw them up on the screen, maybe right here somewhere. I've got Flashpoint Beyond by Jeff Johns. It is I read all these digitally, so I don't have the physical copy here. It is just a further diving into the Flashpoint event from the Flash comics. It's what set off the New 52 in like 2012 or something like that. I read Moon Knight by Warren Ellis. It was so good. It was really good. It's my third Moon Knight book, and it was my favorite one. It was really short, 6 issues. All these were just paperbacks that I read digitally. The Moon Knight one was great. It's like very quick, easy read. I mean, I read it in one sitting easily, and it just makes me love Moon Knight. I actually bought a Moon Knight figure that, you know, as you can tell, I like figures. So I did Aquaman Andromeda by Ram V. This was sort of billed as like a Aquaman horror, Lovecraftian horror story, and it kind of was. The art was really fun. The story was engaging, but it didn't blow me away. You know, it's pretty forgettable, sadly. I think it's my second or third book I've read by Ram V. I did Descender by Jeff Lemire, which I really enjoyed. I would definitely continue with that series. The first 3 I mentioned are all just one-offs, but Descender continues. It's like, you know, 30 issues or 20 or something. I just read the first 6 and I really enjoyed it. And then the last one I did was Lucifer by Mike Carey. And it was my favorite thing that I read. My favorite graphic novel that I've read recently. It's from the spin-off from The Sandman. So it's the Lucifer from Sandman. And the first issue is a little... Okay, it's actually like, it's a 3-issue little mini-series, and then a 4 issues of the first main continuation of Lucifer. So the 3-issue little mini-series to start things off was really, really good. A perfect way to start the series. It's Lucifer, and God wants him to do a favor for him. So it's just strange. I've said before, I love religious horror, and that's exactly what this was. It was like the weirdest, creepiest things about religion twisted into like a horror story. And I love that. That's one of my favorite sort of horror tropes, like The Exorcist or Between Two Fires. Those are some of my favorite books, you know, books with a dark religious theme. I'm not religious, so I don't know what that says about me, but I really liked Lucifer. I would go a little deeper into all these books, but we're already at like 20 minutes, so I just wanted to do a recap of what I read recently. And I know it's been over a month, but I'm again in the middle of a huge novel, so it'll take me a little while. So, thank you guys for watching. See y'all on the next one.